Hey everybody, it is Marley K. Happy Saturday. Good to hear from y'all. I'm glad you stopped by. Don't forget to like and share the channel, share the video, subscribe, and don't forget to check out the description so you can get the links to the things that I'm going to be talking about today. So what I'm talking about today is sex and culture and how sex and culture um, basically, if not used appropriately, can destroy societies. And so I've written about and talked about, America is failing. It's no secret. Everybody in the world knows America is the empire is failing. We are close to about the 250-year mark. And because of things that we've done or the powers that be have done um, in terms of shifting the culture away from, family-oriented, nuclear, family-oriented, even if the family is not nuclear, but just traditional family values, and things that build communities, because those are the things that build communities, and the energy that we use to create for prosperity purposes have been redirected towards things that are more sexual in nature, that deal with feelings and emotions, things that are temporary, fleeting, and that do not build societies, strong communities, or strong families, or just strong individuals. And so I was doing some research because I just had a question, um, because of just my own discomfort. I'm Southern, Black, middle-aged. I grew up, my most of my family, my mom didn't go to church. My dad, he did go to church, but like not strictly religious, but my grandmother was. But, throughout my life, I only went to church a really small period of time. So I lived mostly in the world, and I've never been one to follow people. So I've never been I can't say I was a feminist. I can't say I was really anything. I was just kind of did whatever I wanted to do, which not looking back, it could be good, it could be bad, but in any event, I'm just saying all this to say that I'm, not religious then, I'm not religious now. Spiritual, yes, but not religious. I don't, associate with any religion. But there are just some things like that are in the Bible, in the Quran, in older teachings that are, um, valuable. If you look at other societies and how older societies that have been around thousands of years have been able to sustain themselves, you'll look at those societies and you'll look at our society, and we as Americans have been taught that we can do whatever we want to do and it doesn't really impact other people. Well, yeah, it does impact other people. It impacts the whole world. And we're seeing that now with um, the way that we've dealt with climate, we've dealt with deforestation, the way we modify food and how we grow food. It's just so many different things that we've done over a span of, you know, hundreds of years to get us to this point where we are. But what I want to focus on is sex and culture and how, a lot of African Americans are really uncomfortable. We've been verbalizing how uncomfortable we are with the focus on everything sexual. And, we can't even have conversations without, it has to be either or. You're either liberal or you're conservative. There's no in between, and you can't rationalize or have a critical thinking conversation without people attacking you. You can't be gay or in the LGBTQIA plus family and be conservative, because that those two things conflict, even though, you know, your rationale for being black first or human first doesn't have anything to do with what, you know, this other group is talking about. They're angry because you're not with them. You can't be a feminist or be anti-feminist or just not a feminist and be seen as not having a dog in the fight. Either you are with them or you're not with them. And so we have all these. There is no gray area in anything. And it's important because we can't have constructive conversations now. And I find myself and a lot of other Black people just like don't have conversations about things that are really important. And the thing that I want to get to is society. So I was reading this study because I started doing research because I was bothered by what I feel as though I'm being bombarded by sexist in music. You know, I live in South Florida, so you turn on the radio, you don't listen to the oldies station. If you listen to just regular radio, everything is about sex and drugs. I mean, they overtly talk about drugs and sex in music. And while I understand, like, you know, when I was in my 20s, um, that's kind of when the music changed to become overtly um, vulgar. But, you know, now we have videos, we have just the way that our community, and I'm speaking, you know, specifically about our culture and our community, we're starting to see the impact of being liberal in our communities. And you're starting to see the divide in our communities because we've gone from taking our energy that we should use to build our communities to shifting inward, and we do whatever feels good and we deal with emotions and things that are pleasing individually with um, no uh, no long-term, you know, purpose for it. You can't, um, you know, and I'll just give you an analogy. I can have sex with somebody, but it's not going to benefit nobody but me and the person that I had sex with. Now, when I release that energy, I may be like, okay, I'm going to go clean my house. So I'm going to cook. I might feel good and go do something. But how is that going to benefit um, you know, the rest of the community? And if I decided I want to go out and make a song about sex and you know, do it vulgarly, how is that going to benefit our community? You know, what is that? It's going to benefit me because I'm going to get paid because I'm going to say the nasty stuff, and society has been conditioned now to um, like that. That's part of our culture now. And I'll make money from it, but how is any of that going to build the community? How does, you know, having sex for a bag or having, you know, giving a blowjob to somebody for money, how does, you know, that might help me individually, but does that action or putting that out into the atmosphere, how does that build up our community? It doesn't build up our community. How does liberation and being sexually liberated build up anything? It doesn't build up anything. Like, you know, what people do with sex, nobody asks you how many times you have sex and who you have sex with when you apply for a job. They just want you to work. They don't care. You know, you go into college and register, nobody cares. They don't ask you how many people you plan to have sex with for the 4 years. They want to know when you plan on graduating and what are you going to do with that degree so that they can track you to see how you're contributing to society. And if you're not doing that, then, you know, you are essentially of no value. And so what kind of has happened over a period of time is that we've lost our way, allowing the dominant society to control what our culture is. And basically now the culture of the nation is focused on sex. You turn on the TV, everything is sexual. If it's not, you can't hardly watch a black show without an LGBTQ character who is overly promiscuous, or black women who are promiscuous and fighting and anti-men, are always, got problems. Like what you see on TV is just, I guess the best way to describe it is chaos. And you can't build anything when you're constantly in chaos. When you're dealing with people who are constantly in chaos and in crisis, you have to fix the crisis before you can move forward. And everything that you see today, it's just crisis. Our music is crisis. You know, singing about drugs, getting people addicted to drugs. Those people who singing about that, they're making a lot of money. The people that are pushing them to make that music, their agenda is to, take us out. They're being successful. Their agenda is to destabilize our families. They're being successful. And we are not necessarily getting the message that that's happening. We are okay with it because the message from the dominant society is, if you don't side with us, then you're a bad person. And you don't see the bombardment or, of other cultures with some of the things that they bombard or include us in. So I was really kind of just thinking, like, why is this focused on us? And then looking at how sex and culture play a role in either stabilizing or destabilizing cultures, communities, and civilizations. So I just started researching, and I found this study by someone called, not called, but he's deceased now, but an ethno-anthropologist named J.W. Unwin, I'm sorry. And his book is called The Fate of Sex and Culture, or something like that. I have to look it up for you. But anyway, the book basically talks about, let me get the right name for you. So the book is titled Sex and Culture. And the book basically summarizes a lifetime of research by this Oxford social anthropologist. And the book's like 600 pages, and then you can get it for free. I'll put the link in the bio. But what his research determined was that after studying 86 societies and civilizations to see the correlation between sexual freedom and, community building or being able to sustain itself. And out of that book, of all the civilizations that he studied, there was, a connection between sexual freedom and flourishing or failing of those cultures. And of those cultures, those that actually were prosperous, and then as they prospered, they became more liberal or sexually free, and we just kind of got away from monogamy. Those cultures failed. Those civilizations ended up dying. And so some of the takeaways from this particular study is that, when you have sexual constraints, either through pre or post nuptial, which is marriage or some type of formal commitment to, your significant other, their culture prospered or flourished, and increased sexual freedom always led to the collapse of the culture 3 generations later. The other factor or notable thing is that um, data revealed that the single most important thing um, with a flourishing culture was that whether prenuptial chastity was required or not. And it played a huge role either way. So say if you were married or if you know, were not having sex prior to marriage, cultures that kept that were stronger than cultures who did not practice that culture. And the cultures that did practice, sexual liberalism, and you did whatever, even if you got married, those cultures declined within 3 generations. And so, that was huge for me because, we're taught to now you can just do whatever you want to do. You can have children, and you hear women, I'll have children by myself. Or you hear men be like, I'll just pay child support and move on to the next woman and start a new family. Well, all those things are problematic in the big scheme of things because it just creates dysfunction and lack, and it's if you've been through it, you understand it. But it's just really interesting that this study came to these conclusions, and this study was done and it was completed in 1934. It was published a little later, but the end result is that every civilization that became more liberal sexually, ended up, there was a decline in the civilization, and then they ended up, you know, falling within 3 generations. And so that's kind of like, I feel like what we're experiencing today. So, prenuptial chastity coupled with absolute monogamy, monogamy were found to be some of the best, most flourishing cultures. So, based on this study, if you had, some type of moral law or culture where you had something that you had to do prior to marriage, and then there was absolute monogamy after you got married, those cultures flourished better. So it's kind of like, I hear men, say, the ladies today not like my big mama, or, I can look back at my grandmother, my mother's mother, and my dad's mother. They stayed with their husbands, long time. And yeah, it's not like they didn't go through things, but they remain intact because they chose to put all other things aside to remain, in this particular, family scenario, because it was better for the entire family. It's like they sacrificed the emotions and the personal for the collective, and that's something that we don't really do now. Everybody is like, I'm gonna do this, I feel like doing this, I feel like doing that. Well, that comes with a cost, and it costs you may have, individual gratification short term, but long term you end up destroying your community and then your whole culture and then the nation, because the culture of the nation changes. So that was interesting. Um, the effect of abandoning prenuptial chastity, like abstaining from sex or, being promiscuous or whatever prior to marriage. It says when strict prenuptial chastity was no longer the norm, absolute monogamy, deism, and rational thinking also disappeared within 3 generations. And I kind of feel like that's what's happening to us today. We talk about, even with the pandemic, you can't have conversations that are rational with people, just common sense stuff, because people are like on the whole other level. But if when you look at the correlation between people's beliefs, how liberal they are in their attitudes versus those who tend to be have a more old school culture and focused on sex and culture, you can see the difference in how those people think. And every now and then you may have somebody that's like in the middle and you just kind of like, I don't understand why this person is thinking and talking like this. But for the most part, you can kind of see the divide. And so, one of the issues, I guess, maybe why a lot of us African Americans are feeling uncomfortable is because we understand that, the way that families were and the way that the families made communities and the way that communities were sustained by people, like all of that is gone now. We are very individualistic, and that is not natural to us because we come from, nations where culture and family is important. So that was interesting to me. Um, Another thing that the study found was it talked about total sexual freedom. And so with total sexual, when a culture embraced sexual freedom, that culture collapsed within 3 generations to the lowest state of flourishing. And basically, Unwin described it as like inert and at a dead level of conception, and it's characterized, basically by people who have little interest in much else other than their own wants and needs. Does that sound familiar? Yes, it does. It sounds familiar to me. At this level, the culture is usually conquered or taken over by another culture with greater social energy. So if you look at what's happening today, the liberal feminist movement in America has basically been in control for quite some time. Probably, I would say maybe since the civil rights era, because feminists got rights when Black people got the right to vote, and LGBTQ community got rights to vote. I'm sorry, not rights to vote. They got their rights during the Obama administration when Biden came out and was like, yeah, we're going to give I think the LGBTQ community can get married. So once that door was open, the LGBTQ community became stronger. And at that point, I would say, you could kind of see the difference in how we all related to each other, what we focused on, what that community tended to focus on. It was never about um, rights to build society. Like, it's just all convoluted. It's really complicated to explain. But when you're talking about having a civilization or a culture, and then that culture collapses, um, it's basically, what did the culture focus on prior to? When it was good, what was it focusing on? And when it was bad, what is it focusing on? And we all can pretty much agree how much America spends time focusing on sex. Like, everything is about sex. You need to see my body. I need to pose for you on social media. I need to talk about sex and music. The men degrade the women now degrading the men. We openly talk about not having permanent relationships. There's a lot of promiscuity and people talking about pleasing themselves individually, less conversations about connections with other people. And now we've been conditioned to the point, like, to not like each other. So it's really difficult to have relationships where you can connect and build family, and then the families and the community where you build and grow in that community. You build the community, and then you're using that energy to build. Like, we don't have those conversations. Even with the LGBTQ community, like, those conversations never center around building anything. It's just always personal. And so that's my problem with the community when we talk about rights and freedoms and things like that. It's like, what are we fighting for? Okay, we're fighting for you to be able to do something personally, but how does that benefit the collective? How does that benefit the nation? How does that benefit your community? And often you'll find nothing that they advocate for benefits the community. Everything benefits individuals and in that small group of people. Doesn't The energy that they spend advocating for things doesn't build anything except for themselves. And it's such a small community that, it's problematic. Same thing with feminism, same thing with, so many things that are tied to culture, what we worship, what we spend our time and energy on. We don't spend our time and energy building things. We spend our time entertaining ourselves. That's the culture. Now, it's cool to be on your phone all day. It's cool to play video games all day. It's cool not to talk to your kids at dinner. I see people, they take their kids out to dinner and everybody's got a phone stuck in their face. Nobody's talking to each other. What's the point? People have kids and the tablets raising the kids. You see a kid got a phone or a tablet, not playing with toys, not having interactions with people. So when you talk about culture, you look at these teenagers, they're on social media, everybody trying to pose, be adults, do adult things. Kids have access to porn now, porn earlier. You see so many young men are addicted to porn. They don't know how to have relationships with girls. They don't know how to talk. Nobody's talking to them about any of this stuff. So all those things contribute to a breakdown in your society when you don't have people to talk to you about different things related to living and building and maintaining a civilization. I wanted to talk about this too. The study found that rationalist cultures, which we don't have, and I will say there's a rationalist culture inside of every culture, whether it's Asian, Hispanic, African American, Somali, Ethiopian, um, Hawaiian, Bajan. So everybody has a culture inside of their culture. And you have some people, no matter where you are, they're going to do whatever the dominant society does. That's a culture. You have those of us who, are conservative, and regardless of, we love everybody, but we are community focused, community centered on sustaining the collective and not the individual. And we're willing to sacrifice and do that. That's rational, and that's what this study found. So rationalist cultures that retained this combination for at least 3 generations exceeded all other cultures in every way when they talked about prenuptial chastity coupled with absolute monogamy, which is something, regardless of the culture. Now, people just like, if I don't like this person, I'll just find me another person. You know, um, we throw out people today like we throw out underwear, or, like you drink a cup of coffee, you drink water, it's nothing. And so when you have that, your cultures decline. And so in rationalist cultures that retain the combination for at least 3 months of prenuptial chastity and absolute monogamy exceeded all other cultures in every area, including literature, art, science, furniture, architecture, engineering, and agriculture. Only 3 out of the 86 cultures studied ever attained this level. And so when you read this study, it's interesting because the cultures that focused on rational, and I say rational, just good old common sense stuff, when you focus your energy on things that are relative to building communities, building families, sustaining what you have, because you can live for the day and do all the fun stuff. You can have sex with anybody you want to, but that doesn't build a community. And when you leave a part of yourself with somebody, all these different people, at some point you start feeling like less than, and then you focus inward when if you hadn't made those mistakes because society says it's okay for you to be sexually liberal, you perhaps would feel better about yourself. You could use that energy to do things that would help your community or help build your family or help develop yourself to make yourself, if you're not, in a relationship or you don't have a mate, you could be using that energy to develop yourself and find your mate if that's what you want. Some people don't want a mate, and that's fine too. But then what are you doing to build up the community instead of thinking about self? Um, the other thing about this study, it talked about time lag. So basically it says if there was a change in sexual constraints, meaning if, you know, and I'll just give an example. This country was founded by Puritans, and then we had the different segments of religion, which basically controlled our behavior. We had laws to govern other things, but basically religion has always governed our behavior in this country. It's just kind of cold. And so as different groups fought to loosen the sexual constraints or increase the sexual constraints, the full effect of that change is not realized until the third generation. And so when you look at, say, Roe versus Wade, um, it's probably about 30 years. Let's see. Let me see. Roe versus Wade passed in 1973. 1973. So, 48 years. So Roe versus Wade was passed in 1973. And then Henry Kissinger passed his NSSM 200, which basically was the plan to depopulate the rest of the earth. And control it by birth control, abortions, food in exchange for birth control programs, et cetera, et cetera. So that took place in 1974. So we're living, say, 47 years after they created this plan, which is a generation. So depending on give or take, we could start with the civil rights era and go to now. That's pretty much 3 generations. My dad's generation is the 60s. I'm the 70s. My children were the 90s. And now I have grandchildren who came in the 2000s. So it's like 4 generations. And so when I look back at the time lag from just when I was born, a generation before me being born, and then, other generations after me, I can see the difference in the releasing of the sexual constraints on society. So it's like the more laws that were passed to make it okay for us to say nasty stuff on the radio, for us to be able to have the right and privilege to watch, vulgar, sexually explicit videos, more access to porn. You think about the television shows that were written, in the 70s. You didn't never see James and Florida Evans in the bed. You didn't see Wheezy and George in the bed. Like, you look at TV from the 60s and 70s. And while they did talk about topics that we addressed, there were some things that were just kind of taboo and that you didn't necessarily talk about. Those things were kept behind closed doors, or you dealt with them on your own. There weren't things that you would see on TV. And now you see whole sex scenes. We got P Valley, we got Harlem, we got, Queen Sugar, we got all these just different shows to Shy, all these, it's just so many different things that you see, and those things have become normalized. And even with our children, in schools, they have basically taken upon themselves to teach your children about sex, to teach your children about LGBT, everything LGBTQIA plus. So even if you wanted to um, maintain some semblance of being conservative, society has taken that right away from a lot of households. And pretty much now the only way to do it is to not give your kid a phone or a tablet and monitor whatever they do, period, wherever. You have to watch what they, put filters on your TV, put filters on your phone, filters on the tablet, just everything. And people are opting out of stuff at school, and folks are offended by it. But when you look at the big scheme of things, and again, people can do whatever they want to do. But like I always say, whatever we do impacts other people. And so when we do things, we should always be considerate of who it impacts. And as we look at America in its current state and the things that we focus on, we're fighting about all sorts of things that don't even really matter. you know um just things nobody really cares about, the things that don't necessarily build communities. And we need to, as we start going through this really horrible phase of decline, because we are just a few years out from totally being conquered. Like, we don't know who the conqueror is. We don't know if we're going to be conquered from the inside. We don't know if conquering is coming from the outside. I've heard people say, hey, y'all better start speaking Mandarin because Chinese coming. It could be the readout people, the MAGA folks. We don't know what is happening, but we know a change is coming because society is having this whole discussion about liberalism, and people are feeling the impact of living in a liberal society, and seeing the decline of civilization. And they don't like it. Nobody wants to live in that. But usually once the study found that once the society went from um, having restraints to not having restraints, it couldn't go back. So the society was in steady decline, and then eventually, within 3 generations, it declined and it was conquered. So that's where we are now. And I kind of struggled with the piece because, me, I was young. I've been out in the streets, been out there, had a good time, had fun. Um, and I didn't think anything of this. Growing up in the South, you hear all these old sayings where, you should settle down and be with one person, don't have children out of wedlock, because, it creates all kind of issues. And, now you live and you're able to see what old people were saying, how difficult it is. And I don't care how much people say, I can do this by myself. You can't raise nobody by yourself. And you can, but it's going to not be well. It's not going to work out good. It's going to be problematic. And, as far as community building, when you don't have all the supports you need, you don't have time to invest in the community. And that's kind of like what we're experiencing now. People are so bogged down with working and trying to survive we can't take care of our communities. So when you have, um, uh, a society in decline, it's like really chaotic. People don't know where to go or what to do. And so, I would recommend everybody kind of read this study because it's very interesting. And, you look at some of the older societies like the Arab community, the Arab culture, you look at the culture, you look at a lot of the African cultures and then indigenous populations and how they live, what their, you know, sexual restraints are. And while you'll have a lot of people argue with you because one, you stepping on their toes and it's personal to them because, it's kind of like the opposite of what you are discussing. When you look at the big picture of things, like, is it, indisputable? Do these things, did this happen? Did the sexual revolutions in these societies, in the societies? And the answer is yes, and it's not really um, disputable. So, I said all this to say, we a lot of us feel uncomfortable because it's not necessary. We understand it's not individual. It's the culture, the sex culture is individual gratification and individual um, energy used for one person to benefit from, or maybe two, or whoever's in your group if you happen, you know, doing the most. But at the end of the day, those things don't really benefit society. And so when we spend our energy focusing on sex, sexuality, um, rights that are for nothing but personal pleasure and not good for building up the society, then your society ends up being in decline. And so, I've been thinking about it a lot because, you see things and it just makes you feel uncomfortable. I watch things on TV sometimes that I cringe because it's like, why am I being bombarded with this? Why can't I have a show that doesn't have to be so raunchy? Why do I have to have a show and every show has to have people who aren't gay? Some people don't have gay people in their circles, but you got to watch a show with gay people in the circles. Some people don't have friends that are feminists. They have people in their community, in their circles who are um, just regular family people. Even if they're single, they don't necessarily have a strong feminist leaning because they understand that they need men and other people in the community to make the community um, function. And men have roles, women have roles in society. We can say it in our houses, you can say it in families, but just in society, there are just things that men can do that women can't do. There are things that women can do that men can't do. There are some things that we all can do, and we can use our energy to do those things together. But it's you know we're so busy fussing about things that just don't even matter that basically society is in decline. And I'm worried because we as a culture are not really paying attention to it. Like, some of the things that we're doing are aiding in the decline of our society and our culture. And, I keep coming back to hip hop music. If it wasn't a market for it, it wouldn't exist. And so we help make it popular. Yes, I me too. But at some point, we have to look at it and say, hey, this thing's causing our community to decline. And in the process, we're going to also take money out of people's pockets because we're not going to, be able, that's not helping us. So if we turn away from it, they have to find something else to do. The people that pay them to give us that, they're going to lose money if we move away from it because we are rejecting that as our culture. But I don't think people see culture and sex in that manner because we are so far beyond the point of being rational and understanding how those things contribute to the decline of societies and communities and households. So I don't see how we're going to come back from this. I think people who are rational thinking and critical thinking, who want to focus on community and use that energy to build instead of putting the energy towards things that will tear down and not build, those people will get together, like-minded people will get together and they will do that. And those who are, I'm down for whatever, I feel like, everybody should be able to do everything, whatever makes you feel good or whatever makes you prosper without thinking about the big picture of how those things work collectively. I think those people will, usher in the final decline of our society. So as you see things happening over the next couple of years, think about, the cultures. You'll see the conservative movement, and they are always talking about, oh, we don't like all this stuff. They don't like civil rights. They don't like black people. They don't like brown people. They don't like gay people, just want pure white people. And you're going to have your liberals who will be going at it. You're going to have the LGBTQ communities going at it. You have all the different racial and ethnic groups. They're going to be going at it. And so we're going to be having this whole war about cultures. And whichever culture is more powerful is going to survive. The cultures that have been adopted that are weakest will be conquered. And so I'm saying all that to say, pick your cultures wisely because you could be on somebody's list because you're advertising your culture, and your culture is on the list to be conquered. So you can look at history and keep doing what you're doing, or you can think about what you're doing in the big scheme of things and how culture is really important and sex is really important in society and how we go about doing those things and how we focus on culture and sex and just what makes cultures function. I think we should really pay attention to that because today, we are living at the end of civilization, whether we want to realize it or not, for whatever reason. I'm not saying sex and culture are the only reasons, but some of the other things that, once we became so prosperous as a society, we became more liberal. When we became more liberal, that's when the decline of the society happened. And so now, you know, in the study it said like a generation is 33 years. And so sometime within this century, give or take, it could be, in within the next 10 years, it could be another, 30, 40 years. But within a generation, we can expect America to collapse completely. And, sexual revolutions, which is a culture within itself, have led to the decline of pretty much every civilization that was studied in this particular study. So I'm going to put it in a link. I want you to review it. You don't, I'm just giving you my own 2 cents. But, I just kind of want to talk about it because I just see a lot of people really uncomfortable talking about sex and culture and how it is impacting our immediate communities. And at the end of the day, you could be liberal, you could be LGBTQ, you could be feminist or whatever. But the fact still stands that when communities move to being more liberal, those societies decline. And all types of empires have been studied and have shown, the same result. So, you can be angry because you are in that group and you feel like, you may feel convicted and you want to lash out. That's what I found when I try to have these conversations with people, because they, want to go and root it into some conversation that's like totally irrelevant to the topic. Either the societies failed or they didn't. And if they didn't, why didn't they? And you look at the more conservative cultures, they tend to last longer. So, you know, some of the things that we as Americans love because we are free may not necessarily be good for us. And as Black people, we need to, really consider this. And it's not that we are lashing out at anybody, because like I said, I can say that I've helped contribute to the decline of society by my individual behavior. But when you know better, you do better. And so as our culture looks inward and we try to fix some of the things that are broken, we need to take into consideration that how we behave sexually and where we put our energy, we shouldn't necessarily focus so much on sex. Sex should be way down the list of things that we're concerned about, because really it doesn't do anything to help our community. We need sex to reproduce. And yes, sex is great. I love to have sex. That's nice. There's a time and a place for sex. I also know that I have to work. I also know that I have to take care of my house. I have to take care of my family. I have to do other things that take up far more time than sex. So I'm not going to spend all my time worrying about sex and sex culture, because those things don't do anything, to contribute to the building and prosperity of the people. It's a necessary behavior, habit, or thing that we need in order to reproduce and for personal gratification. And I'm all for personal gratification, but it has a place. And so what we need to do is we need to reclaim our culture and get back to the basics, because that's the only way our culture will survive. So when you go back, you should study history and look at all the other cultures and look at what they did, how they handled liberalism, how they handled women in power and money and wealth, and prosperity. Look at how we raised our kids. Just look at what community was, how we looked out for each other, what family was, what community was. And we should try to take our energy and put it towards things that go get us back to what we used to be. Because like right now, I feel like we are lost and we don't know what our culture was, because our culture has basically been bashed, like for what we were. Um, and when we were stable and okay, now we're just like not bad, but not where we used to be in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And, a lot of things that happened to us, it wasn't our fault. But regardless of the fact, like, we know more now than we did back then. And so we should apply what we know as far as living in America. In addition to this study, um, in regards to sex and culture, and try to figure out ways that we can, those of us who are like-minded and like to think rationally, how can we stop our society from collapsing? Because our culture is going to collapse when America collapses if we don't have a plan or um, a method for sustaining our culture. And when it collapses, we'll be conquered too. So that means now, we're dealing with white supremacy, but whatever the next thing is for culture, we're going to have to do that. So, I don't know what that is. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know who the conqueror is going to be. It's most likely not going to be us. But, we have to be able to create the culture and community in society that we want to have in order for us to move forward, or we just be conquered by somebody else and we're going to be doing the next thing that the next culture does, and eventually we'll end up in the same cycle. So, when you know better, you do better, and I feel like we need to really um, think more about sex and culture as it relates to us as a people, because we've already been demonized and used sexually, and we were co-opted and brought into these different movements that didn't benefit us. And so now we're in disarray, and white supremacy is in disarray too, because now we're liberal and everybody is focused inward on individual gratification and progress instead of collective and community and society progress. So, just read the study. It's long, it's like 700 pages. So take your time and read it. And I'll put some links for some other thoughts about the topic. And I'll be interested to hear what you have to say in the comments. I also wrote a piece about it. I haven't got a lot of reads on it because, of course, it's about sex, something typically I don't talk about, but it's tied into white supremacy culture, how, we are influenced by things that we don't necessarily have any control over, and how those things take over our communities and our societies and our cultures and become ours. So don't forget to like the video, share the video. I'm interested again in having a conversation about it. I would like to do a live about this one because I know I have a lot of people who, I talk to individually, online or offline, but we can't have the conversations because, you get attacked. If you're not getting attacked by feminism and feminists, you get attacked by the LGBTQ community because it's in direct conflict with how they live and what they want to do, but that is in conflict with what makes societies healthy and strong and prosperous and able to sustain itself. So, we have to have a meeting of the minds to talk about this. And it's not that, like I said, you're not trying to bash anybody, exclude people. It's about sustaining society. I think that's really important. If you can't sustain yourself, you know, what are we going to do? So you all, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you paying attention to what I have to say. And again, don't forget to like the video, share the channel, subscribe to the channel, and read the information in the description because it's a really interesting study, but it's also relative to what we're experiencing today for those of us who are, really feeling uncomfortable because all of the talk, um, just a constant bombardment of focus on sex and sexuality from like little children to old people. Everybody's talking about it. So, I feel like we need to talk about it. And, I know there'll be some people who will disagree with what I have to say for a variety of reasons. That's cool. But I just want to give my 2 cents about it because I feel like we are not having a conversation that needs to be had, and it's relative to our survival. So, we need to figure out what our culture is and and control it. Control our culture like everybody else controls their culture. What happens in their culture is their business. We need to do the same thing. So I look forward to hearing your comments and reading your comments. And again, have a good Saturday. Be safe. Um, y'all take care. Think about what you're doing, everything you do, it impacts somebody else. And so if you're not using your energy for community building, sustaining your family, and sustaining society, what are you doing? And is it really worth it? And, you know, look at us in decline. Do you care? And if you don't care, then cool. Just do whatever, live whatever, and let's fail upward. But if you do care, think about the things that we're seeing, the things that we're bombarded with. How can we fix those things so that we don't meet our demise, and we are not conquered by some other society or civilization that is more powerful than us. Like we're, a lot of us feel conquered now, but once this thing, war, whatever you happen, of cultures, of people, of societies, whatever happens, something will replace what we have now. And if we don't have our own culture and values and um, laws and codes on how we behave individually, sexually, pre-marriage, post-marriage, in relationships or whatever, what governs us, then we're going to end up in the same position in 3 more generations. So think about that, and you know, don't argue with me. I didn't write the paper. I'm just telling you what the paper said. I'm the messenger. That's all. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.